Hello everyone. Hello everyone. Szczepan Urbanowicz speaking. It's we're back at the Go with the Flow, a global watercolor conversation. We've been through 16 time zones. Now we're into the 17th show, and we're again about to talk with another amazing group of watercolor artists. We have again David Poxon, who's going to be running and hosting this group. We have Keith Hornblower, Simon Jones, Bowden, and Rosa Sepple. Welcome all. David, on to you.
Thank you, Szczepan, and hello everybody around the world again. For those who are just tuning in to this incredible event that's been set up by Szczepan and his technical assistant there, Alberto, who should get a round of applause because he's doing an amazing job. Well done, Alberto. So we'll go with the flow, 24-hour conversation, and we are living in very strange times, difficult times, tragic times for a lot of people. And as watercolour artists, this is our way of holding hands around the planet and sharing some kind of empathy. There are some good things that are coming out of this pandemic, and maybe this is one of them, that we will not take things quite so much for granted in the future. Things we just overlooked before we'll treat as more precious, particularly the closeness and the meeting of people and the camaraderie that we can get. So today we are sharing these thoughts, visions, hopes and dreams with all our fellow artists around the planet and enthusiasts. And I'm going to swiftly move on now because I've got some great guests again. I'm very lucky with the groups I've got. There's fabulous artists and wonderful people as well. And I'm going to introduce you now to my first guest, who is a really interesting painter. He's a painter that I wasn't that familiar with before the flow came onto the scene, but since then I can't stop looking at his work. He's a guy that had a long career and distinguished career as an architect, and he's worked on some amazing projects including the Millennium Dome, the Channel Tunnel, the Tate Gallery, Victoria Station, loads of things. He's travelled the world, lived in India, been all around the place, lived in Australia too. He was born in South Wales, which is a beautiful little country attached to England, or England's attached to Wales, country with steeped in history and folklore, amazing people that really have struggled for their existence. And the other thing about Welsh people is they do have incredible singing voices. So it's a great pleasure to introduce you to Simon Jones. Hi Simon, how are you?
Hi David, very good, thanks. I was actually an architectural visualizer on those projects. I wasn't actually an architect, so yeah, I'm a visualizer, not an architect, which I continue to do actually. Yeah, I'm still pretty busy as a visualizer. It's a really good contrast to all the sort of deeper stuff I try and do with my normal painting for galleries. It's just a very good foil to have that sort of frenetic activity and then come back then to the sort of more, I don't know, mining reality that I do in the paintings.
Yeah. One thing if I could just interject there, Simon,
yeah.
When I've been looking at your work and studying it, the thing that stands out for me is the incredible feeling that you generate from the work that you produce. You're not painting what I would call pretty scenes particularly, or you're not looking for the obvious view. Your work does have the feeling, to me, it generates feelings that I get when I look at the work of Hopper, for instance, Edward Hopper, or even going back further, Walter Sickert, the English painter that painted some very dark kind of subjects. I'm not saying your work is dark, but there's always a feeling of drama in your paintings, that there is something happening slightly off stage that captivates the viewer. Is this something that you're conscious of when you're working?
Well, definitely. I spent maybe 10 years painting in oils, painting very much in the same style as Hopper and, well, actually, De Chirico. And I really analysed them in a very sort of scientific way. I deconstructed them and then reconstructed them from the sum of the parts, and I worked out kind of what parts did the magic and what other parts were kind of superfluous. And as I say, it's a very scientific way of approaching painting, and I feel like through science I can try and achieve alchemy. That's my aim. So then I took these lessons that I learned from that 10 years basically of being lost basically. I took them to watercolour, and a lot of the, well, first of all, visually, my paintings carry on with dark shadows and the low afternoon summer light, and the idea that people are kind of lost in their own lives, their own narratives. But also, I tried to take the idea that there's stuff happening, as you say, off stage, and it's sort of, there's a lot of the paintings I paint, they are very personal to me, in that the areas I paint, a lot of the areas are actually where I grew up, so they're imbued with meaning for me, and I can't really get away from that. It's not really something I try and put in the paintings, it's something that comes from the scene, really. So,
Shall we have a look at some of these paintings, Jem?
Yeah.
Sorry, Simon.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a series of paintings I did over the winter. Basically, as I said, again, I've got a sort of scientific approach to painting, which is I repeat the same elements, same weather conditions, same lighting conditions over and over again, kind of ad nauseum. But then what that leads to is that I can kind of get beyond the technique. The technique becomes transparent. And then I can dig down and get more kind of, I don't know, sort of otherworldly things that come into it, like crows or gothic nature of the scenes or whatever like that. So, as I say, this is just a tiny fraction I probably did about 100 of these paintings. I do paint quite obsessively and quite quickly. And then to look in more detail, but this is one scene in particular that to me was a kind of culmination of this approach. Along the top there, if you can see the mouse, there's 3 versions of the same view. And it's an evolution. It sort of starts off, there's a few people there, and then they refine it to just one person and a stronger light. And then a much, much stronger light. But I didn't quite like the idea of just one person coming towards you. So then down the bottom left, then this was I moved the viewpoint, but only a viewpoint by about maybe 4 or 5 meters. Now this to me, intuitively, has got more going for it. There's a figure there moving from the light area towards a kind of dark, nondescript area. And again, on the bottom right here, this is the totally refined version. To me, it's just very, very satisfying. You've got a figure going from the light area to the dark area to all this area here, which has got very little detail in it, and then I said the crows then start appearing. It's sort of the other. That's what I'm kind of trying to get to. Is the other. By the other, it's nondescript by definition, but it's not the physical sort of reality that we sort of see in front of us. It's the underbelly, all the weird stuff that goes on underneath.
The bottom right painting that you've got there, Simon, is personally I find that very, very impressive, because, like you say, you've developed the sort of the storyboard through your other versions, and there you've got the definitive thing that you were trying to get out of yourself. This hunched figure walking towards the light. With this flock of crows or whatever they are hurtling off into space, and this incredible light source that's coming from the right, which is echoed with the light from the windows. I think that's a tremendous painting, and it's unique, I think, in that I can't think of anybody else painting around the world, and I try and keep up to scratch with everybody. I can't think of anybody else that's actually working like that at this present time. So, well done. You're really onto something great there. Great.
But there's to me, like, there's layers of personal meaning within it that mean nothing to anyone else. But I think they glimpse that there's stuff going on there which people find quite intriguing. It's like you don't really understand what the hell Hopper's on about or the Kiriko, but it's kind of quite engaging and intriguing. So if I'd say just a list of personal stuff in this painting, my grandfather had a shop just on the left there. Most of my ancestors were up until about 1860, they were buried there. Later on, they were buried in the chapels, which is further on. That's my favourite pub. My gallery is behind there. I was born just down there. There's a Neolithic trackway running behind this building that developed into the trackway to the Roman fort, and then it became, when the Christians came along, then it became the main street of the town. There's layers of there of meaning for me, but I think other people are kind of glimpse that there's something else going on. So
one thing strikes me about those paintings down the bottom with these hunched figures, it just came to mind, is Andrew Wyeth's father. We all love Andrew Wyeth, but his father was N.C. Wyeth, the great illustrator, who was also who was trained by Howard Pyle. And one of the great N.C. Wyeth paintings, which was the illustration for Treasure Island, I think, was of a blind Q leaving a public house, a pub, with a great hunched over figure, and you could sense the power coming off that. And I this is reminding me a lot of that. Fantastic painting, Simon. So
I think I know that painting actually. Yeah, it's that look, isn't it? That hunched look.
That's great. Great. So check it out, everybody watching around the world. Check out N.C. Wyeth. Don't just look at Andrew Wyeth, look at his father too. Great illustrator. So I think we've got to move on now, Simon, but thank you very much. That's wonderful. Perhaps we can come back and have another look at your stuff a bit later. Now then, my next guest is someone that was reasonably new to me as well. He lives not far from Simon, in a city called Bristol, which is in the southwest of the UK, also home to that great RI member David Parfitt, a friend of ours, same initials as well, so that can't be bad. So Jem's paintings, he's painting the landscape mainly, and he started painting as a young boy, 10 years old, like a lot of us did. He's won several awards in his life. Probably the top award was from the SAA, which is a big art platform in the UK. Very good place to get your products if you want to buy anything. And he won the top Artist of the Year award from them. Nowadays, he likes to help everybody with their watercolours, does various tutoring, and one thing about his painting is I found the delicacy of the washes and the accuracy with which he can, I've watched a couple of his tutorials, the accuracy with which he can hit that tonal definition straight away, which obviously incorporates a tremendous amount of expertise. So I'm very pleased to introduce you to Jem Bowden. Hi Jem, how are you?
Hi David, you're too kind, but thanks very much anyway. Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks very much, Szczepan and Alberto for this, and it's an honour to be here. I don't know why you invited me, but I'm grateful. Thanks very much.
Well, it's because you're handsome.
Oh dear.
Lovely word.
It's
beautiful
I just
work.
see my camera's not in tune. This isn't me being too weird. I'm just trying to bring this
The focus.
into focus. This can bring it into focus.
There. That might have done it. That's close.
It's not a great camera, but that's a bit better.
Yeah.
So, Jem, how has this pandemic impacted your work?
Well, it has impacted my work a lot because mostly of the fact that I enjoy plein air painting mostly, and over recent years I've become almost, I think of myself virtually as a plein air painter almost entirely really, and I do paint in the studio, of course, in winter, as I have to, but I could do with making more use of that. But I love the outdoors, so it comes from my lifelong love of being outdoors, really. And in fact, now I think painting for me is just a part of being outdoors, really. And my painting stems from the subject. So, it's nature, it's the weather, the whole atmospheric feelings that you get from being outdoors through all the senses. And although I'm making pictures when I'm there, to me it's kind of just a part of it. And so that's my focus. So obviously couldn't go outdoors at all. That was a major blow personally. I mean, obviously I'm just very lucky because I haven't been ill or anything, but in terms of the artwork, spring is my favourite time to go outdoors as well, especially early spring. And then there's the work, I suppose, teaching work. Obviously that's been almost completely cancelled in terms of the workshops and painting holidays and so on. But Zoom is quite good. I mean, I was surprised perhaps a bit, but actually I've started teaching one-to-one via Zoom, and it works quite well. I've had some quite good feedback, so I think it's a good thing for the future, actually.
So do you think, Jen, do you think, Jen, that this pandemic will change or have any permanent change in the way that you work?
Yeah, I think I mean, in terms of predicting the future, well, it's probably never less been predictable, has it? But Zoom, I think, well, not just Zoom, but this online way of teaching that will probably last. I imagine that will last as long as the internet lasts, and it could be useful for doing demonstrations. We can do demonstrations like this as well. So that's good. In terms of, I don't think it's going to change my work in terms of my own painting for myself, so long as I'm able to get outdoors in future. I mean, that may become a bit, well, I don't know how much it's going to change sort of in the near future, but things are changing, so we'll just hope the best. I think in terms of teaching and earning a living from doing this sort of thing at all, I'm just very grateful for the time I've had, and I certainly hope it can continue, really.
Do you feel that your studio work that you're painting for yourself is different to the work that you would do in maybe a class or a workshop? Is there a different feeling that you get, a different sense of inspiration when you're working on stuff? Because that painting that you've got in front of you displaying now is, I'll use that word again, traditional in the English style, as people will know. The 17th, 18th century is where watercolour started in England, and this very much follows in that tradition. It's spot on. You're hitting those notes straight away, seemingly without any particular struggle. It's very impressive. Is the work different that you're doing now than what you would normally do?
Well, now I'm back outdoors for the last fortnight, so I'm very grateful for that, of course. And so it takes a bit of getting the eye back in. So I've got a few pictures here actually that are sort of plein air pictures, and I'd like to whip through quite quickly and just talk a bit about from that. But this is like the first one I did when I went back out, so it was very excitably done, and I can be a bit like that. It's very much sort of I try to be spontaneous, and it can be a bit of a hit and miss approach that I have, really. But that's okay with me. I take my losses quite happily, really. But in terms of the studio, your question about studio, and really teaching is great in terms of developing and being experimental and learning things that, you teach other people things, and you've learned a lot of it. I think a lot of painting is psychological, really, as much as learning the techniques and getting a grasp of the medium, technically. But teaching is great in terms of studio development for me, and getting ideas on things I know I should sort of do to stretch myself. And my work is really quite representational, and it's not abstract. It's kind of hopefully does. I really fall within kind of the English tradition, and to be honest, I'm quite happy with that. I don't think I'm not trying to do anything different or anything like that. Maybe at one point in my life I'll be a bit more like that. But so this is like the second one I did when I went out. Oh no, that was the first one. The other one was the second one. But totally getting my eye back in here. What I'm doing here is I'm just showing you some that I picked out more recently, and I'll whip through some others as well. but I can never decide which ones of mine are like the better paintings, if there's such a thing. So I've just got the ones that are more recent.
What's what's particularly impressive, I think, there, Jem, is because we're all fans of the great English painter that's sadly gone now, Roland Hilder.
Yeah, I'm a fan. Yeah.
Who was also a member of the Royal Institute.
Yeah.
Born in America, but lived for a long time in the UK. And I'm not sure whether he became president of the RI or not. Maybe he did. But your work there, that painting, for example, Hilda was particularly fond of the English landscape. That's what he did, and he specialised in winter landscapes. Now, I know we're not winter now, but these have that sort of wintry feel about them, and your choice of colourways with this mauve and purple transitions into that grey umber is very reminiscent of that, and it's analogous, but at the same time the use of your complementary colours make those paintings not just harmonious, but they resonate to the viewer. Is that something that you're conscious of doing when you're painting, or do you just go off intuitively?
It is quite intuitive, but I mean this one, I do just use quite a limited palette. This one is only 3 colours. It's kind of my 3 colour palette, if you like, of so it's phthalo blue, raw umber, and Indian red. So yes, quite earthy grey colours. I do like grey. I'm not a very bright painter, and so a lot of them are quite grey. But that was late winter, early spring, which I really like going out in. It was a bit damp, and it did look quite grey. Anyway, but I don't try to follow closely what I'm looking at in terms of colours in a very literal way. I just use whatever is on my palette that's an approximation. But colour is not the most important thing to me. Like Joe Dowden was saying before, it's much more tone that I would put first, and even other things like mark making, composition, edges, all the rest of it. Really, it's more important than certainly matching tone, matching colour. Colour is obviously extremely important, but it's not the most important thing. Listen, these are all plein air paintings. That's so that I do village scenes as well. I like old buildings.
Fabulous.
And when there's nice old wonky buildings, I like to sort of make them a bit wonkier. That's the character. And likewise, trees. So there's another village scene. And that's my hometown of Bristol. I almost got blown over doing this. In fact, I was with various other artists, and their easels all got blown over. But mine didn't. I recommend that, my easel for that. I can't remember what it's called now. I'm not here to advertise easels, but so I do this. That's Gloucester. So I like old buildings.
David, I'm just calling time.
Yeah, Jem, that's fascinating. We could go on forever listening to your looking at your paintings because they are beautiful. For those that don't know, Jem lives in Bristol, and Bristol is a coastal city. It was a very important place for the UK in terms of exporting its products around the world in the good old days. So, moving on now. Thanks, Jem. Moving on now.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Cheers. Okay,
we'll come back. Moving on now to somebody that is very well known amongst the UK painters, and he's also getting a reputation overseas as well. He's exhibited quite a lot at the RI, at the annual show in the Mall Galleries in London, which people that have been to the Mall Galleries will know that the Mall is the premier venue for watercolour painters in the UK. This guy also had, like Simon Jones, a background in architecture. And I'd like to introduce you to a good friend, Mr. Keith Hornblower. Hello, Keith.
Hey, Keith.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
How are you, Keith?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes. Yeah. Good to see you all, and thanks for the sterling effort, Szczepan. It's incredible.
It's all good.
Okay, so Keith, I know from our previous chats when we were talking about doing this little project, that you have very strong views on equipment.
Well, I do, yeah, because
What are those, without being rude about anybody?
I wouldn't do
What
that.
are those views?
Okay. I used to spend a fortune on expensive sable brushes. I thought that to be a serious artist, you had to spend a lot of money on equipment, getting the right stuff, the handmade brass palette, and so on. I've got some palettes here. They're all cheap plastic ones, all filled with different pigments. You can buy these dirt cheap, fill them with different colorways, and just play around. Brushes as well. One of my favourites at the moment is this one, which is just a cheap hog bristle brush. I like the idea of using inappropriate materials just to see what will happen. I like to play.
Keep it clean,
playing, experimenting. Sorry?
Keep it clean.
I am. Yeah. Always keep your brushes clean. Yeah. Although again, my water pot is, I have a huge water pot. It's an old sweet jar. I tend to fill it, and it often sits there for months, and I just keep using it until it's too thick to stir, and then I'll go and change it. So I don't get too precious about clean water either.
So looking at your work, Keith, which I've been looking at, and we can see that painting behind you there, which is very, very dramatic. A lot of dark colourways in it, but it's still got that incredible tonal contrast. Is this dark phase in your life a new thing, or has it always been there?
It's probably a little more intense now. I'm really getting into black. I'll get over it, but at the moment I'm painting very, very dark. I like the darks. I like the mystery of darks. Can I just go on to share screen? I can bring that picture up. Hang on a sec.
David, just a quick note to you about the time so that you don't miss out at the end, that's all.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, this is painted using largely black. If I had to choose one colour to paint with, it would be black. Because like so many of the others, I'm very much a tonal painter. And I just like to maybe warm the blacks with another colour. And just lately I've been using Caput Mortuum Violet. Caput Mortuum was traditionally made from grinding up Egyptian mummies. So I'm brightening up my blacks with dead body.
Even though it's black, Keith, there's a lot of colour going on there.
There is, yeah.
Yeah, and compositionally, I think that, for my eye, that's a very, very brave composition with these leaning verticals, striding their way towards the sky, and the sky itself is incredibly dramatic. The more you look into this painting, the more you see. Fantastic.
Thanks, David.
How do you think this lockdown? You mentioned this black mood that you're in. Do you think this lockdown has affected you in that way, or was this something that you were?
The lockdown has given me some serious hair issues, but otherwise it doesn't affect me at all, really. I'm very much a studio painter. I go out, I take photos, lots of them, and I just use them as a kicking off point really for my paintings. So I do appreciate, Jem, the value of painting outdoors. But I like to work in my studio, it's comfortable. I've got my coffee, I can play my music, and I've got constant light, and I can experiment. So that's why I like to paint indoors in my studio.
Well, I'm sure, Keith, that you've gained a lot more fans around the world who are looking at that. I mean, to me, that's a winning painting. That's another one as well. Incredible painting there, Keith. Very
This is
dramatic.
one I did on Vimeo very quickly.
Yeah.
It's up there if anybody wants to see it.
Yeah.
Again, using
Right.
darks, but just with a warm wash to go through as I lifted off darks to reveal the light. It's kind of painting back to front.
beautiful work, and I think we can detect your architectural background in this, but you are veering away from it as well. So that's great. I think we've probably got to move on a little bit now, Keith. So
Okay, that's fine.
Come back to you. Thank you very much for sending us
All right.
and showing us that great work. And obviously we'll see you again. We'll see you at the next RI show, I hope. So moving on now. My next guest in this wonderful little group that we've got here is somebody that I know quite well, I think. And she has come from a very humble background, was sent to school in Italy. She has had a lot of struggles in her life, personal and otherwise, but has shown incredible persistence, determination, and ambition. And she also came to painting quite late in life, although of course she's going to have a long life ahead of her. So I think she was. I won't say how old you were when you came to paint, but in amongst all this, she's risen to become one of the UK's most successful, commercially successful painters, and she's also the first lady president of the Royal Institute of Painters in Watercolours, known as the RI. It's a great pleasure and privilege to introduce you all to Rosa Sepple. Hello, Rosa.
Hello, Rosa.
Hello, everybody. Oh, what a build-up, eh? You're embarrassing me, David. Yeah.
Well, that's my job.
Yeah. Oh well. It's made me quite emotional.
Oh, don't be emotional. Well, you can be emotional because we know painting is very emotional, and you've had a very emotional life.
Wine.
I mean, so could you just tell us a little bit, Rosa, about your early life
Well.
and how you came to painting?
I started painting only about 20 years ago. I always used to draw as a child, and so painting wasn't something I'd ever done. But when I was in my late 40s, I'm going to give my age away now, it's 20 years ago, and it was my late 40s, and I used to walk the dog round the block, and I saw a little gallery, and the artist used to paint in the window, and I admired the work and loved to watch her painting. Gosh, this is difficult. And we became friends. I started painting, my paintings started selling. My husband suggested I did a local exhibition. I'm cutting a long story quite short because I don't want to bore anybody. So I did a local exhibition. I met somebody who was to send me on a path of becoming an RI. He mentored me for a while, showed me all sorts of techniques and things, and I became an RI after I'd only been painting for about 3 years. I feel quite guilty about that because some people try for many years to become an RI, and it just happened overnight for me.
Well, your work, Rosa, is I think I'm safe in saying that your work is unique in that it's not necessarily traditional watercolour in the English tradition, we'll say, or even the European tradition. Your work there's quite a lot of other things in there apart from watercolour, I think. But the subject material of your work, I think your life and the struggle and the characters that you've met comes out in your work, and your work always tells a story. and it's the kind of work that people just want to have on their walls because it makes them smile, it makes them laugh, it reminds them of a good time they had or even a bad time. Where do these characters come from that are in your paintings?
The characters seem to come out from the paintings themselves. When I'm painting, I see something appear, and all of a sudden they become people and part of the story. And I always paint for myself, for my own amusement, and to make myself happy. And when I first started painting, I just used to throw some paint on some paper with the water and see what developed. And I would always see shapes and people. You know, much like, you know, when you look at a tree trunk and you see a shape and maybe a face appear. Or, you know, on a floor, when you're, you know, looking at someone's wooden floor, you'll see something. And that's really how my painting started. But then, obviously, after becoming an RI, I thought I'd better learn how to paint. So at that point, I really worked really hard. I felt I was really lucky to become an RI, and I worked hard so that my peers weren't disappointed. I mean, that was actually the year that my dad died, and I think that maybe if it hadn't have been for that, I wouldn't have carried on painting at all. I'm not promoting my book, but all my stories in a book, I find it quite difficult and quite upsetting to talk about my childhood and how I became an artist at all. In fact, for many years I wouldn't call myself an artist, and probably still don't. I still consider myself a painter, and a very lucky one. I feel so blessed and so lucky that people like my paintings, and they buy into them. They see their own story, because once I've painted something with the story ends, and I actually don't even remember painting it. And then I see people smile when they look at the work, and they say, well, what made you paint that? And I've almost forgotten, but they've made their own story, and their stories are often better than mine. And I'm so lucky I have lots of people that collect the work, because I think they're just on the same wavelength as I am. They like to smile and be happy. In fact, I think you can see one of my first paintings behind me, which is a clown, which I just started with a splodge and a red nose, and the other people just developed from that. I could go on for hours and hours, David.
So do you think, Rosa, that you found in your life that painting has been a kind of a therapeutic salvation for you? That you're able to get lost in the painting, like a lot of us, we're in our own personal zone when we're painting, and this has helped you cope with some of the struggles that you've had. I can see that in your work, and this is why you're a very loved person, not just in the RI, but generally. And now, you did mention your book, Rosa, which I'm very pleased to own a signed copy of your book. Have you got it there, and you could just share it with us? It's called, everybody, this book is great. If you haven't, you need to get this book. It's not your normal painting book. It's not a how to paint book. It's a story of Rosa and her life, illustrated with great paintings in there, and it's called Out of the Blue. Can you hold it up a bit more, Rosa?
Yeah. The reason I'm so proud of this, David, is because I want to inspire people. You know, I started from nowhere with nothing, and I've become, as you know, the president of the RI. And if I can do it, I just want people to know you don't need to go to university and college and be taught by great artists. Nobody taught me. I experimented and I practiced, and I went to the library to read books, and then gave up and thought the only way I'm going to learn anything is by I try and paint on and see what happens with it.
Yeah.
Which I still do today. I mean, you know, I often feel I've just started, and but I want to encourage people. I want people to get the love from it. I've met wonderful people, and I've been so fortunate, and I think it's there for everybody for different reasons, you know, as therapy or if they want to earn a living at it, you know. That's not what it's all about. It's not all about the money.
That's true. I think that you're a very inspiring person that encourages a lot of people. So people watching this will take a great deal of joy from you and your story, and especially your book. So
Absolutely.
thank you very much, Rosa.
Thank you.
That's been
I
great.
hope so, maybe.
Thank you. Thanks, sir. Thank you, Rosa. It's been special to hear your story and hear everyone's stories. Now, before we close up, we've still got David that we need to ask some questions of, because this is his slot too. So, I'll if I can briefly sort of just ask David some questions. David, we've sort of had a bit of a brief chat over the last couple of weeks, so I've gotten to know you a little bit. As I have gotten to know a number of the artists over the last 2 months. But I remember our conversations and the way you've been sort of describing, in fact, your journey through the last number of decades. You spoke about the accolades with the RI, your book, Watercolour, Heart and Soul, and of course the latest thing that you're working on with the IWM, which is now happening next year. Can you sort of talk a little bit about your journey, and then talk a bit more about where what the future is for you?
I'll try and be quick, because I don't want to bore people too much.
No, please.
My journey started. I was born in the industrial half of Wolverhampton a while ago, which is an industrial city in the middle of England, and I think I was about 10 years old before I saw a tree. There was lots of grey stuff around here, factories and everything else.
I'll have to press you with 3 minutes, sorry.
Sorry, 3 minutes?
That's the one, go for it.
Okay, so I'll show you this then. When I was 4,
Yeah.
my grandmother gave me a paint box, which is this,
Wow.
as a Christmas present, and I've still got this paint box. And you can see over the years I had more paints
Wow.
for me, and I used to take them all out and glue them into this paint box. Somebody bought me a tube of gouache once, which I nearly wrecked the paint box with, and I never touched any ever again. So that was my journey. Suddenly I had a world of colour in front of me, not all the grey around me. And then one day they could see this effect on me. They took me on a day trip to London, to the Tate Gallery. I think I was about 8 years old. And I stood in front of Turner's painting of Hannibal crossing the Alps, and up there, and that to me was like a light going on in my head, and
Wow.
I thought, I want to do that. I didn't know how, but that's what I wanted to do. It's only later in life, when I became an RI, which I'm very, very honoured to have become an RI, which is kind of pinnacle of your career in the UK, certainly. To belong to something that's nearly 200 years old is great. That I found out that Turner himself had been a forerunner of the RI, along with other great painters. Moving on quickly, here's one of my paintings behind me, which is typical of what I do. I try to find the DNA in the subjects that I paint. I'm interested in texture, but I want to rebuild those paintings on the surface of my paper. This is one, when I've been working on something complicated, I usually go back to basics. This for me is a basic little blue
Wow.
block
Superb.
painting. I use a multi-layering technique, so maybe there's 17 to 18 layers
Wow.
of paint in there. To me, watercolor painting is not a race. It's not how fast you can paint. Watercolor painting to me is not a race, it's a search for yourself. And I think certainly it's been a privilege to be the host for the 2 groups I've hosted, and all the people on these programs, which have been fantastic. They're all on their own journeys, and they're all searching for themselves. Some people are a little bit further down the road than others, but we're all on the same road, and we should all rejoice in the fact that we found something that we love. Whether you sell your work or not, it doesn't matter. It's getting lost in that special zone that's just so therapeutic and valuable, especially when the world has so much darkness in it. So,
True.
thank you very much, and with that, I'm gonna have a cup.
David, that's brilliant. I mean, that's just an inspirational piece right there. You know, a very, very small snapshot of a number of years of what you've been doing, and in fact, to all our guests for all of the years of experience. There you go, watercolor, heart and soul. David, there's the book. Grab it.
It can be yours. If you go to my website, I'll even sign it for you.
Everyone's got it. Great. If I can extend a thank you, a great big thank you to all of our artists today. Look, this show would not be happening if it wasn't for your generosity and help and assistance and time and energy to come in front of the cameras and tell us about your journeys and the things that you do and the way that you do them. So again, thanks again. It's been a great pleasure to host you here on this show. And I think I'm blown away. I'm sort of lost for words. Thank you again. And for all of the viewers out there, I'm sure they've had a fabulous time watching you all. So as we do say at the end of this session, enjoy your watercolor painting and go with the flow. Global Watercolor Conversation. Go with the flow.
Go with the flow. Cheers.
Go with the flow.
See you, everyone.